You know how some characters just feel okay at first, and then you find the right build and suddenly they become a monster? Yeah, that's Hailey. She is now one of the strongest mobbing characters in the entire game. With this setup, you're going to be melting everything in your path. We're talking about dealing millions of damage, non-stop ability spam, and movement so fast it barely feels fair. I would really appreciate it if you were to hit the subscribe button, but without wasting your time, let's get right into the build. I want to first talk about the Transcendent module you're going to need to use for Hailey, and that is going to be Cold Heart. So it would override your fourth ability into this AoE attack where whenever you were to activate it, you would unleash this chilling explosion around you. And also too, your cryo will change into the ultra cryo. That is the first ability as what you're seeing here. And with your ultra cryo, whenever you get max stacks, it will remain the same. But when attacking with a skill, it will remove all of the stacked effects and it would deal additional damage. So basically what you're going to want to do for your first ability is aim it at a target. Be sure to pay attention to the debuff on their health bar. Once they reach 9 stacks, you're going to want to use either your second ability or your fourth ability to deal that increased damage. So for your second ability, this one will deal massive amounts of damage to single target enemies. We're going to be using this ability for like bosses. And for the fourth ability, we're going to be mostly using this when it comes to mobbing. So whenever you activate your fourth ability, it will unleash this explosion damage radius around you, and it would also inflict frostbite to the enemy for 2 seconds. So frostbite will just immobilize the enemy. And for your passive, it would increase your skill critical hit rate and also your skill critical hit damage whenever you're near targets. So you're going to be within 25 meters to the enemy. And for your third ability called Cold Heart, when you activate this ability, it will increase your firearm critical hit rate, your skill critical hit rate, and also your firearm penetration. When this ability reaches maximum stacks, which is 16, her firearm and her skill critical hit damage will increase even more. The best part about this is that when you're using your roll or your grappling hook, the stacks do not decrease. So you can freely do whatever you like and you don't have to pay attention to losing your stacks on this ability. So this is basically like you becoming Viessa, but instead you won't release the trail of ice behind you. You just run really fast, but you're getting all of these other benefits. For the submodule, I recommend going for mid-air maneuvering just to traverse the area very quickly. And when it comes to increasing your skill critical hit rate and damage, because Hailey is extremely good for that, you're going to want to run these 4 modules. The first one is emergency measures. The second one is front lines. The third one is skill insight. And last but not least, you're going to want to run skill concentration. So with these 4 modules, it's going to increase your skill critical hit rate and also damage. So this is a mobbing build. So we're going to want to be able to spam our abilities as fast as possible. So you're going to want to put these 2 modules. This is for your skill cooldown, nimble fingers, and another one is MP conversion. Also too, be sure to go for focus on chill for that additional skill cooldown, and same thing goes for focus on singular, because for singular it applies to all of her abilities, and for chill because Hailey's chill, so she's chill like that. And last but not least, we're going to need as much range as possible for our fourth ability to get as much enemies as possible to bust the load all over them. Pause. You're going to want to run skill expansion and also amplification control. But here's the thing, if you were to run amplification control, the survivability for this build is going to be extremely low. You're basically going to be a glass cannon. If you don't want to become that, you can swap amplification control to increased HP. And we are going to be using a weapon that would help us group up a bunch of enemies to help us use our fourth ability to obliterate everything in front of us. So in the gameplay, as you were seeing, I was using increased HP instead of amplification control. Onto the trigger module for Hailey. I recommend going for this trigger module called Power Beyond because of one thing. You'll be getting a skill power increase. Be sure to get this to the yellow tier, but I sadly could not. But if you really want to tie it to the build when it comes to using her abilities, I'd recommend going for this one called Relative Speed because it ties to your first ability and we're going to be spamming that non-stop. So when you're hitting an enemy with a slow type skill, which is your first ability, it will build stacks of relative speed. Upon successful weak point attack with a firearm, while at max stacks, it will deal skill damage to enemies, and the damage will increase by a percentage of max MP. Just to give you guys a demonstration, I'm just going to be spamming my first ability as what you're seeing there on the bottom, that little bar that's going up right now, and then I'm just going to keep spamming it until it's full. Once it's about to be full, I'm going to do it one more time. The cooldown is pretty schmeat, but here we go. Now it's at max. So I'm going to hit it once and I'm going to get that weak point hit. And that little blue explosion that you saw there, that's the trigger module. For the main weapon I used for this build is a new weapon called Hypernova. You could be able to get this in the battle pass. And yes, I do know it just came out, but I swiped a card. Yeah, I know, because of unlocking the unique ability for it. Here's what it does. There's a bunch of reading here, but you're mainly going to want to use a sword when it comes to using your special ability. When you activate your special ability, you're going to yeet it in front of you, and it would create this little vortex that would suck enemies inside. And as the enemies are getting sucked off inside, you can bust a load on them with your fourth ability. And also too, why I wanted to get the maxed unique ability for the sword is because of the range, because the range will be 10 meters. So basically with the sword, is what you see there above my shield is my special ability. So I recommend aiming it above the enemy. You're going to press your special button, and then it would suck everything off in front of them, and then you can just spray and pray in front of them. So here are the modules. You can freely copy it if you like, max out everything. And for the final one I wanted to go with is Better Insights. I don't have it, but if you don't know what it is, I'll just show you what it looks like. So this is the module that I was missing, so the final mod slot, be sure to go for Better Insight. And for the stats for my sword, if you want to copy it, feel free to do so. I'm gonna go up again, freely pause it if you like, but yeah, here's what I went with. If you don't have the sword or don't want to use it, I recommend going for a Frostwalker because of one thing. The buff for the scout rifle is called Sub-Zero Sensation. The trigger rate is 30%, and if you were to hit a weak point on an enemy whenever you are 12.5 meters away from the enemy or further, it would increase your chill skill power. The rest of the other buffs is what you see here don't matter. The main thing that matters is this. So you see here, you see the meter on the right side of the screen where my reticle is. I am 26 meters away. I'm going to get a weak point and hopefully I can proc it. I'm going to keep shooting and shooting. And as what you see there, my reticle turns icy. That's how you know when you proc this buff for Hailey. And once you have that buff activated, it would increase your chill skill power by 32%. And if you would like to copy the modules, you can freely do so right now. All right, for the Arche Tuning for Hailey, here's what I went with. I went all the way to the enhanced skill power for more skill power. I went with cooldown and a little bit towards skill critical hit damage. If you want to fully optimize and getting as much skill critical hit rate and damage as possible, you can cancel this and you can focus on going all the way to this. So I believe if you have this setup, it would bring your skill critical hit rate all the way up to 98%. So if you want to get as much skill critical hit rate as possible, copy it right here. Or if you want to really focus into dealing more damage with your abilities, be sure to go through this route right here. And for the socket, I went with Arche Concentration just to increase my skill critical hit damage. In order for you to activate this, you would have to inflict a debuff onto a target. You're going to get 3 stacks of this, and each stack will give you 12.5% skill critical hit damage. And in order for you to activate that buff, you're going to want to either use your first ability, in which I highly recommend because it just gave me 3 stacks of it, or you can use your fourth ability, which will give you that refresh timer. All right, on to the Inversion Reinforcement. I went with this one, Selective Neural Stimulation, just gives me MP over time every 45 seconds. The next one I went with is Focus Boost. When defeating an enemy, it will grant focus boost. My skill cost will decrease. Or if you want to go more into the ability spam type of route, you can go for this one, Arche Circulation Tactic, which on hitting an enemy with a skill, it will grant Arche Circulation Tactic, which will give you minus 24 skill cooldown for 10 seconds, which is pretty nice. And the other one I went with is Blade Extension because I'm using that sword. So when landing a melee weapon critical hit, it will grant Blade Extension. That will give you your attack range modifier and weapon critical hit damage for 30 seconds, up to 5 stacks. And if you were to change the weapon, it would remove the buff. So on to the reactor. Be sure to go for a Frozen Singularity Reactor. And also for the traits, go for skill cooldown. You're going to need to put that for this build for the ability spam, and also go for skill critical hit damage because again, Hailey is a you know, when it comes to that skill critical hit rate and damage, yeah, you're going to need a lot of that. And for the external components, I went with the Polar Knight set because if you have 2 sets of these, it will give you an extra chill skill power. And also for the 4th set, for each frostbite stack inflicted upon enemies, that is your 4th ability, because remember, you're going to be dealing frostbite, your firearm critical hit damage and your skill critical hit damage at a 30% chance up to 10 stacks. And it's a 5-second duration. So you're going to be getting more skill critical hit damage and firearm critical hit damage. And lastly, when defeating enemies that are inflicted with frostbite, they'll deal additional damage equal to 30% of max HP to other enemies within a 2.5 meter radius at a 12% chance. You can tell if you're getting Polar Knight night is when you see this buff right here. Hopefully I can activate it as what you see there, that little AK that's shooting out with those stacks. Yeah, that's when you know you're activating Polar Night. For the auxiliary, I went with max HP, MP out of combat. For my sensor, I went with MP recovery in combat and max MP. For my memory, I went with defense and MP recovery modifier. And for my processor, I went with max shield and ease of display time. All right, I'm going to be showing you guys the gameplay loop for this build. You're first going to want to activate your third ability. You're going to run around like nothing. Once you reach maximum stacks of your third ability, be sure to activate your first ability to spray and pray, and then activate your fourth ability. If there's still enemies there, then get your sword, use your special ability to suck them in. Once they're sucked in, blow thy load on them, and then they'll just die like that, and rinse and repeat. Also too, with the fellow, I recommend going for the Husky, aka the Snowy Sled Dog, because it would automatically give you MP every 45 seconds. This build isn't MP hungry, but it really helps. If you're really struggling with survivability, then go for this fellow, which will just automatically give you HP every 30 seconds. If you guys did enjoy this build video, I hope that helped you and you learned something new. And if you did, I would greatly appreciate it if you were to hit that like button and also subscribe. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, evening, or afternoon. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.